Welcome to part 4 of a very special series featuring American Cassette Ministries Associate Speaker, Pastor Richard O'Fill. Our topic today is, How Does God See Me? Another way of asking that question is, God, I'm all dressed up. How do I look? Once again, frankly speaking, here is Pastor Richard O'Fill.
We're going to have two sermons this afternoon, and I know that you get that painful look on your face, but it isn't going to be as bad as that. I don't preach a long time, so we'll do one, and then we'll have just a little, like a 5-10 minute stretch, and we'll do the last one, it'll be all over. That's not so bad, is it? Glad that you're here with me. I was out in Wyoming one time, and the pastor had invited me to preach at his church, and I'm going to go preach over at Blackfoot. And he said, you don't have to go over there because there'll probably be nobody there. And I said, no, I've traveled all this way to preach, so I'll go with you. He says, well, there may not be anybody there. And so we went over there, and you know how many people there were? One person. So we went ahead anyway. There got to be 5 in the end. So I'm glad that there's at least 5 of us. Makes no difference how many are here. The fact that we're here just one-to-one. And I want to talk to your heart today. The little talk I'm going to do now is a very hard one. In fact, when I did it the first time, my wife said to me, I don't think you ought to do that anymore. She said, they misunderstand. And I knew that there was trouble, because when I stood at the door, somebody shook hands with me and said, and I won't tell you how they were dressed, they said, I agree with you, Pastor. And I thought, honey, you missed it. So I didn't preach that sermon anymore. I gave it up. But then I thought to myself, no, you can't just give it up. Just preach it, but really preach it careful, real slow. So as you hear me talk this afternoon, if you go to sleep and wake up, you'll miss it. Or if you listen to the first part and you say, I know what he's saying, and you turn your mind off, you'll miss it. Just keep right with it, and at the very end, I'll ask you what I said. And if you say something else, I'll say, you missed it. You say, what are you talking about? I'm just giving a little introduction here, all right? You ready? Everybody ready? Here goes. I live down in Florida, and our office building is right in front of what they call the Florida South Hospital. It's a great big 10-story hospital. And down in Florida, as you know, there are lots of lakes. And so our office is here, the hospital is here, and there's a big lake here. There's one over there, and there's one behind there. Lakes all over the place. But anyway, the hospital is right by the lake, and so if you cross the street, and sometimes we go over to the cafeteria to eat over there, you cross the street, and right down beside the hospital, between the hospital and the lake, there's a sidewalk. And you walk then right down the sidewalk beside the hospital, lake on one side, hospital on another, and by the sidewalk on both sides, here and there are park benches. Are you with me? Palm trees, park benches, lake, birds. Makes you wish you're in Florida, doesn't it? Anyway, so one day I'm walking along this sidewalk, having crossed the street. Now, people who set out on those park benches might be dressed in white clothes or green clothes, which means that they are what? They are the hospital people. Then there might be people that are dressed like you and me. Now, they might be 2 kinds of people. They might be even patients. The other day I was walking over there, and there was a fellow throwing bread to the turtles. Lake's got lots of turtles in it. And I said, hey, what are you doing? He said, I'm a patient here. He was dressed in a cowboy hat, and he said, yeah, I'm in here for a heart infection. So you would never know to look at that guy. He was a patient. Now, some of these other people are dressed like us, but they're not patients. They are relatives of patients. So one day then, I'm walking along, About halfway up the walk, I see a park bench and a man is sitting on it. I think to myself, I'm going to sit down and talk to him. And so I sat down and I kind of turned and I said, "How you doing?" He said, "Not good." He said, "You know, my wife has been in the intensive care for 100 days. I said, "Oh? Oh, yes." You notice something about him? He was smoking like a chimney. He said, "My wife has been in the hospital for 100, maybe not intensive care, but in the hospital for 100 days. She'd gone in for one of these bypass surgeries." You heard about that, where the blood vessels get plugged up and they take blood vessels out of the leg, they put it in the heart, so the heart, because the blood vessels get plugged up. And so what had happened, she had had that heart surgery, she'd had all kinds of complications, and she'd almost died, and so there he was. And he said, "She's not good," and boy, he just started pouring it out. And he said, "I've been praying that the Lord would help her to get well." And so, now, you see what I'm doing, don't you? Because that's what I was noticing, Pastor Ohm. See, I wasn't hearing his words so much, I'm seeing him smoking. And when he said to me, "I've been praying that the Lord would make her well," I'm thinking to myself, if you were really praying, you wouldn't be smoking. You understand what I'm saying? And so, but I didn't say that, fortunately. And I expressed my sympathy, and I said, "Would you mind if I said a prayer for your wife?" "Oh, yes," he said, because he looked at his watch. Because what they do in intensive care, they'll only let you be in for a little while, make you go back and forth. They come in and go out. And so he looked at his watch and I said, "Can I say a prayer for your wife before you go?" He said, "Yes, would you?" And so I said a little prayer, and that was the end of it. He walked in, he went back to intensive care, and I walked down the sidewalk, and that was that. He didn't know me, I didn't know him. Would you believe it? The next day, I was walking down that same sidewalk, past the same park bench. No, it was a different one. Up this time on this side, I looked up out of the corner of my eye, and there was that same man sitting on a park bench. And this time he had someone sitting at his feet on the grass, a lady probably about my age. And so when I looked over, he looked and saw me, and he recognized me from the day before. And what could I do, you know? So I turned off the sidewalk and I started walking up towards him, and as I got near to him, I said, "How's Mother?" "Oh," he said, "she's better." And by that time, I'm getting near enough that I noticed this lady sitting on the ground. Great big earrings on. These kind of big as $50, made out of plastic or something. Great big old rascal. See? And she's sitting there, and I noticed in her lap, she has a book called Cosmic Conflict. Have you ever heard of that? What is that? That's Great Controversy. And so by that time I'm there, and he says, "I'd like for you to meet my daughter." And he introduced, and I say, "How do you do? I'm so and so." And do you know, I asked how Mother was, and we started talking, and it wasn't 2 minutes. And we were talking about heaven and the coming of Jesus. And this woman began to talk to me about how much she loved Jesus, about how she loved to study the Bible, how much she was looking for going to heaven. She told me how she sang in the church choir. And you know, I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, yeah, if you love Jesus so much, what are you doing with the big earrings? I didn't say that. You see, I was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist all my life. My father was a minister. Now mind that Daddy never talked to me this way. You know, like, he never talks, huh? But I can remember when I was a little boy, about this big, I once saw somebody eating a hamburger. And I said, "Look, Mommy, they don't love Jesus." Interesting, huh? I was thinking to myself, how can you love Jesus and eat meat? Let me tell you something else. This is kind of terrible to say. When I think of Jesus eating meat, I'm ashamed of Him. I know what I mean when I say that. Two Adventists were talking one time, and one was saying, but Jesus ate meat. And the other one said, yes, but he didn't have the spirit of prophecy. Isn't it funny how we get to be? I feel like that in regards to healthful living, I'm even better than Jesus. I'm a vegetarian. Now, I'm telling you this experience because when it happened to me, I realized something was wrong with me. I was out of focus. Because I realized that when I talk to people, see, I'm judging them with my eyes. If they're doing the wrong, in other words, if they don't have on my uniform, and it just happened that way. And I went into the Scripture, and there's a little story. I'm not the first person that's been that way. There's a story in Matthew 15, and you've heard the story, because Jesus and His disciples were walking along through the wheat fields one day, and they reach down and they get this wheat off. I don't know if you've ever done that or not. You know, you go like this and you shuck it like that, and it's terrible, but it gives you something to chew on. So anyway, they're shucking this off and they're throwing it in their mouth. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious leaders, usually harassing them like they did, and they said to Jesus, your disciples are eating and they didn't wash their hands before they ate. Now, hey, don't misunderstand. It was Jesus Himself that told the children of Israel back in the desert that it's better to wash your hands before you eat. Hey, if especially when you get your hands all dirty and diseased, this is one of the problems in other parts of the world, the infectious diseases that come from the lack of hygiene. So hey, I believe in washing your hands before you eat if you can, but you know what they had done in those days? They not only figured that you needed to wash your hands to get the germs off, but they figured if you didn't wash your hands, you had to wash the sin off. See, they were exaggerating this so bad. And Jesus turned to them and He said, you're confused. Jesus said, it's not what goes in that corrupts you through your mouth. It's what comes out of your mouth. And that really made those religious leaders mad. In fact, I read someplace that when He said that to them, they said right there, that's the end of Him. In fact, excuse the expression, it blew the mind of the disciples. Because later when they were alone, Peter said to Him, what are you talking about? What did you mean? Declare unto us this parable. And Jesus said, you too, you don't understand either? Jesus said, don't you understand that whatsoever entereth in at the mouth goeth into the belly and is cast into the draught? But those things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart. They defile the man. And then He starts telling about what really makes you dirty. He says, for out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man. But to eat with unwashed hands, these defile not a man. I want to tell you something. Don't misunderstand me. I told you, I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist. And you may not agree with me. But externally, you know what I mean when I say externally? On the outside, if outside things really mattered, I'm already a saint. So if you want to see a saint, take a good look. Hello. Look at that. No jewelry. No jewelry. Not even a tie clip. See what I've got? I tuck my tie in the back here. I don't even need a tie. See, you did this. You're not wearing any jewelry either. But some of you are thinking, oh no, we'll get you, Pastor O'Phil. You got jewelry on some way. Your watch is your jewelry. Hang on. Rubber band. See, I'm covered. I'm covered. If the way you dress is what makes you a saint, then I got it made. Now, I want to tell you something else. I want to tell you how us saints are. I told you, not only that, when I was 12 years old, I stopped eating between meals. So there. Now, if you stop eating between meals when you're 12 years old, your problems are over. So look at me. Get a good look. If the way you dress and the way you live on the outside makes you a saint, you're looking at one, honey. Don't eat between meals. If that's what makes a person a saint, I'm already there. But I want to tell you that though I don't have trouble with between meals, and though I don't have on any jewelry, and though I'm a vegetarian, I still have trouble with bitterness, with jealousy, with temper. Are you with me? Are you with me? You know what I'm talking about? With anger, with impurity, and with untruth. So I guess those things on the inside, I guess I'm as bad as anybody. Because of reading the words of Jesus, which says, hey, buddy, it's not what you are on the outside, it's what you are on the inside that makes a difference. So I've come to the conclusion now. Remember I was talking about earrings? You know, if you like to get Adventists really mad, talk about jewelry. One side says, yeah, the other says, no, no. And then pretty soon we're fighting. You go home and you're going, oh boy, those guys will be lost for sure. But I've come to the conclusion, though I don't wear any jewelry, you notice? Listen to me very slowly now. I have come to the conclusion that there are people who love Jesus who wear rings. I have come to the conclusion that there are people who don't love Jesus who wear rings. I have come to the conclusion that there are people who wear rings who love Jesus. I have come to the conclusion that there are people who don't wear rings who don't love Jesus. It says in the Old Testament that God doesn't look at us like we look at each other. That we look at each other and judge each other from the outside. You see, we'll look at a person and say, oh look, that person is tall. Or that person is short. Or that person is thin. Or that person is not thin. God never looks at you that way. Or that person's a male, or that person... He looks at you deep down in your heart. Now this is good news. The good news is that God doesn't look at your outward appearance. But you know what the bad news is? At least it's bad for me. If God looked on the outward appearance, I got it made. But the bad news is He looks at the what? At the heart. Now, I'm not going to say this afternoon that it doesn't make any difference what we wear or what we eat or what we do. That it doesn't matter because it all has significance. But the things we wear and the things we eat and the things we do doesn't necessarily have the significance that we give to it. We like to argue about these things. You know, we like to argue, us good guys, about the bad guys. And the bad guys like to talk about the good guys. And, you know, that's from our point of view. You might want to talk about jewelry today. God doesn't want to talk to us about jewelry. But He wouldn't mind talking to us about problems that we might have with pride or selfishness. Because there are people who wear jewelry that don't have problems with pride and selfishness, but there are other people who wear jewelry who have those problems. Now you and I might want to get together and say, is it all right to eat hamburgers? Or, hey, what's wrong with a little wine now and then? Tell me what's wrong. Prove to me from the Bible whether I can drink wine. God doesn't want to talk to you about that. He's bored with that. But God would like to talk to you about self-control. Are you with me now? Self-control. See, that's the principle. What we eat is decided by self-control or lack of self-control. He would like to talk to you about the power of influence, because you can say, hey, what's wrong when I do this once in a while? You know, like I know I say to people they get all, they say, what's wrong with a little bit of wine once in a while? I say, hey, I don't know the answers. I don't know Greek and everything, but I'll tell you this. I know the evil that's from alcohol. And I don't care if a little glass of wine was healthy. I hate it. I hate it because it's causing murder and rape and death and disease and destruction. And I don't want to have a part of anything that would encourage that or would give an example to somebody that could cause them to fall into these things and be destroyed. It might make me healthy, wealthy, and wise, but it could send another person to hell. That's why I stay away from that stuff. You see what I'm saying? No, I'm not. I mean, I could have a little this. No. Hey, listen. God also wants us to be healthy. As I told you this morning, we don't want to be healthy. Now, we might want to be healthy philosophically, but you watch the way we eat. A few years ago, they had this thing on television said, I bet you can't eat just one. You know, so I go to somebody's house and they'll say, hey, how would you like a cookie? Now, that's nothing wrong with having a cookie, but I wouldn't eat just one. I have to eat 10 cookies, 50 cookies, 100 cookies. I can say I want to be healthy, but I don't have self-control. We're killing ourselves by the way we eat and by our bad habits. God doesn't want to talk to you about cookies. One lady said to me one time, she said, I know God doesn't want me to eat sugar. And I wanted to say, no, don't cry. Don't cry. Your problem is not sugar. Your problem is self-control. Talk to Him about that. He wants to talk to you about self-control. In fact, one of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. He wants to give it to you. Ask Him for it. Take it. Don't cry about sugar. Cry about self-control. Cry about the way you treat your children. Cry if you're unkind to your husband, but don't cry about sugar. You may want to talk to God about going to movies. You might want to say, hey, what's wrong with going to the movies? We watch the same stuff on TV, don't we? What's wrong with this and what's wrong with that? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? God's bored with you. He said, don't bother me. Don't ask me which are good movies and which are bad movies. He says, you know what I want to talk to you about? I want to talk to you about whether you're a friend of the world or not. Because you see, the world is my enemy. He that is a friend of the world is a what? Enemy of God. And I know this, young person, today. The last thing I want to be is God's enemy. Don't you? Oh, I don't. So whatever's God's enemy is my enemy. So I'm not going to argue with God, seeing what I can do, see how close I can come, I don't want to argue with God and say, God, you will really. See. So who falls on his head? Tell me, who falls on his head? God? You with me? Catch on? It's not as hard as we make it, is it? See, we're trying to just kind of put it off. We need to just look ourselves right in the face and say, God is not mocked. We're not fooling anybody but who? We're fooling ourselves. Young people, brothers and sisters, we need to stop looking at other people and judging them. And I want to tell you, this is one of my greatest problems. By the way, when we get together with each other, who do we usually talk about? Come on. We talk about other people, don't we? Let me ask you this. Do we usually say good things? No way. You know what they used to do when I was in the academy? They had a real dirty trick. They would have two guys and a third guy would get under the bed. You know what's coming? Somebody comes into the room, somebody's under the bed. These two guys who are planted there, they start talking about the guy under the bed. The guy who walked in the door, he doesn't know the guy's under the bed. So they start saying terrible things about the guy under the bed. When this third guy is really into it, you know what happens? Out from under the bed comes you know who. This one guy's face goes, hey, but it makes no difference, does it? Whether he's under the bed or whether he's not. Hey, you know, I wish God would, I know He must forgive me, but if there's one thing that we could do for each other that would make life so much easier, would be get off each other's back. Accept each other for the way we are. Stop looking on the outward appearance and start really caring about each other from the heart. Wouldn't you be happier if that's the way life was? Sure. We need to stop looking at others and judging them. Stop boasting about our own lifestyle. You know, look at me, big saint. And start looking at our own hearts. You know what I mean by heart? I don't mean this. I mean into our own heads. And start seeing ourselves really as God sees us. And I want to tell you, though I look good on the outside, I know my own weaknesses. Do you know your weaknesses? Do you know what's wrong with you? Are you willing to know what's wrong with you? You're willing to admit it? You're willing to let God do something really to change your life and mine? I want my life to be changed. I'm fed up with talking about other people. Hey, I don't like to be talked about. I don't like to be criticized. I don't like to be judged. Then how come I'm doing that to everybody else? I was riding along in a car one time with a man, and he said, you know, Dick, he said, I'm really confused. He says, you talk about being a sinner. You know, sometimes when I talk the way I do, you say, oh, yuck, what kind of minister is that? He talks about these problems. Hey, listen, I'm a human being. I know what human beings are like. Aren't you like me? He says, but this guy says to me, he says, you talk about yourself being a sinner. He said, I can't think of any sins that I'm doing. Hear what he said? I can't think of any sins that I'm doing. Do you hear the word? Doing. I said to him, I know I'm a sinner because I know my thoughts. See, you don't have to do something to be in a bad way. I know my feelings. I know when I'm angry. You know when you get mad? Do you know when you lose your temper and you say, that may never get past your mouth. But you and I know that. And so I said to this person, I know my thoughts, my selfishness and my anger and my dishonesty and my impurity. And listen to me. You know what he said to me? He said, those are just human emotions. He says, those human emotions are okay as long as you don't let them dominate you. He said, I guess, listen to this, your concept of sin and mine are different. Now, I don't know what your concept of sin is. Your concept of sin might be one, my concept of sin is another. I don't think it makes any difference what your concept is or what mine is, but I want to know what God's concept is, because He's the one that's the judge of all the earth. So I don't think that we really gain anything to get together. One person says, do you think I'll do this? I think that. I don't think this. I don't think that. See, we're wasting our time. What we need to do maybe is to get together and say, hey, what's God's will? What's a holy God like? How does a holy God live? Do you know, in a little while we're going to be in heaven. You don't think angels stand around on the street corner telling dirty jokes? Hey, you know, when they talk to each other, they don't cuss. Hey, you can leave your car unlocked in heaven. Nobody's going to steal it. They don't run off with each other's wives and other stuff that we do. So obviously, see, living in there is different than living here. Now, before we went to South America, we went and studied Spanish. And we culture. Because if you're going to live in South America, you better speak the language. You better know how they live there. Hey, you planning on living in heaven? We are, aren't we? Sure we are. We're going to be in heaven one of these days. And I want to know how they talk to each other. Don't you? What do they talk about? What do they think like? How do they treat each other? Oh, I don't think that your concept of sin makes any difference. Neither does mine. But God's concept makes a big difference. So I'm praying in my own life that God will help me to quit looking at other people. Because the things that I judge them for are my own problem. I know it's my own problem. By the way, if you're standing in line, waiting to go in a line, you're standing in a line and somebody crashes the line, you get mad, right? Why? See, there it is. Because he's getting ahead of you. You wanted to be ahead of him. It works that way. Usually the things that make us mad about other people are the things we ourselves would have liked to have done. Or we figured that was our right to have done. That's what Jesus meant when He said, the things that you see in others are the very things that your own problem. So I guess the time has come in my life at least that I'm fed up with that. I say, God, forgive me for that. And then I want to get into my own life. Hey, I can't change you. I don't care if we have 1,000,000 sermons. I can't change you in the least. You might even say, Pastor O'Phil, you're right, you're right. You go out Saturday night and say, I know I shouldn't do this, but... The only one that can change you, husband, you can't change your wife. Wife, you can't change your husband. But Jesus can change you. Jesus can change your husband. So listen to what we need to do for each other. Number one, we need to pray for one another. If you think somebody needs changed, don't criticize them. Rather do what? Pray for them. And secondly, if you want to get into change your life business, whose life can be changed? My own. Good news, God doesn't look on the outside. Bad news, He looks on the heart. I feel the need this afternoon for a change in my life, at least, and I'm a minister. I can't think of any sin that's being committed anywhere here in Washington that those seeds of those sins are not in my own heart, and I must continually contend with those. And I want Jesus to make me an overcomer and to wash my life and give me a new heart. Do you want that for your life? What about it, young people? Yes or no? Yes, right? Hey, would you think it would be all right if we, I don't mean to embarrass anybody, but could we just do a little prayer for this? Would this kind of scare you? What would happen if you share this feeling? That if we would just take, before we go to the next little, that talk wasn't too long, was it? It's all over before you? If before we go to the next talk, why don't we kneel? Just with the person next to you. You don't have to pray out loud if you don't want to, but it would be nice. And you could say something like, Maybe you could say, Jesus, help me to love everybody and change my own heart. Something like that. Just some little one-liner. Would that be all right? Try something at least. Or you could say, Jesus, help me to be like you. Or come into my heart. Or forgive me for something or other. Or if you know how to say a little more of a prayer, go ahead and give a nice little prayer. Or if you just can't stand it, just embarrasses you to death, just say to the person, popped right off then. Say to that person, pray for me. Shall we do that? Let us kneel for just a few moments of prayer, 2 by 2s.
You have been listening to another special American Christian Ministries presentation. This recording has been digitally reprocessed from the original audio cassette or reel-to-reel in order to make this CD available. The audio quality was improved as much as possible. International copyright, American Christian Ministries. All rights reserved. To order a copy of this or other presentations, or for a free catalog, please call toll-free 800-233-4450. International calls dial 717-652-7000. You may also order from our secure website at www.americanchristianministries.org. There you will discover the largest selection of authentic Adventist preaching available. If American Christian Ministries has been a blessing to you, why not take a moment just now and send us a note or an email with your testimony? We'll share it with our speakers and volunteer workers to encourage them. Your prayers and continued financial support are very important to ensure the continuation of this ministry as we help prepare America and the world to meet Jesus Christ. He's coming soon.